Hello everyone, thank you very much for being here, and thank you Imata for letting me present this. So last January, Wiki, a female killer whale living at Marineland Antibes, was all over the news. A research conducted by Jose Abramson and the University of Madrid showed she was capable of imitating human sounds. Even the National Geographic magazine came around the pool to hear from Wiki. We know from observation in the wild and in marine parks that killer whales learn from other members of the group, so we assume they are capable of social learning. But it was not proved yet. So how and why did we ask our animals to do what the other is doing? You will see that the training was different depending on the individual, their age, and their background, and the use of the co-PSD in training. So from training to research, on to training again. There are 3 ways to go through a learning process. So there is the operant conditioning with Skinner, the classical conditioning from Pavlov, and the theory of social learning from Bandura. So a lot of you knows already operant conditioning and classical conditioning. Let me explain you about social learning. So I have a great example for you. Who has had trouble with the elevator when you arrive here? Am I the only blonde one here? No, thank you. So this is where social learning kicks in. What happened? Well, I think you probably saw someone using the elevator. Then you understood how it was working, and then you were able to reproduce the same behavior. And therefore, you learn the behavior in a social context. So now that we know about social learning, we needed a signal to be able to ask our animal to reproduce what the other is doing. So we used what we call the co-PSD. So it states very simple, 2 touching face. And what's interesting here is we wanted the co-PSD to be different than what we use usually. Usually in training, one SD is associated to one behavior, but here we wanted the co-PSD to be associated to the concept of do what the other is doing. So before we go to the training of the co-PSD, let me explain you how we wanted to do the experiment. So at first we decided only to test the animals on action imitation. It means on moving behavior, like rolling over or lifting a pectoral fin. So this is how we were working. You have the model killer whale here. It's the killer whale that's giving the example behavior. And example behavior at first would only be familiar behavior. It means behavior that the animals are able to perform on a daily routine. And the imitator killer whale here is the one that is going to reproduce the same behavior, we hope, than the model killer whale. So how it goes? The trainer A gives a familiar SD to the model killer whale, and the model killer whale do the SD, is performing the behavior. And then the trainer B gives the copy SD to the imitator killer whale. So the imitator killer whale has to reproduce what the model killer whale is doing. And the board that you see here is just a visual barrier. It's to prevent the imitator killer whale from seeing the familiar SD given to the model behavior. So now we're going to explain how we train actually the copy SD. So we're back in 2009 because it started quite a long time ago in 2009. And the team in place at this time decided to use a game already existing between the animals called the squirt game. I don't know why the video is not working. Okay. So at first you have two animals and only one trainer. The two animals are facing each other, and as you see, one is asked to squirt, and the other one is expected to squirt back. So that was, again, they were doing for years already. We just had to generalize the game. So here we choose a familiar behavior, which is a big wave. We ask a big wave, and we expect the other animal to reproduce the same behavior. To help him, we can just point to ask him that, please look there, this is what I'm interested in. And at this point, one of the killer whales we were working with was able to generalize the game in only one single trial. So the next step was to introduce the copies. And for this, we decided to have one trainer per animal to be sure to get enough focus on each individual. So we use again a familiar behavior, it's a hula here. So we give the SD to the model killer whale, and we give the copy SD, and then we point the imitator killer whale towards the model killer whale for him to understand this is where you have to look, this is where we want your attention to be. And it took between 1 to 2 sessions for the animal to understand this. And once this was understood, we could introduce the visual barrier, the board. So you saw the trainer asking for a rollover, and the other trainer is asking for the copy, and the animal is performing exactly the same behavior. So we did a lot of trials with 15 different familiar behaviors to test the capacity of imitation. And then it was time to test the imitation capacity with new behavior. It means with behavior they never saw before. So at this point, we were working with 3 different adult killer whales. So we decided to train new behavior on each one of the 3 different adult killer whales. And for the training, we make sure that the other killer whale wouldn't see the new behavior. They were never in the same group, so they had no idea what was going on. And again, we did a lot of trial, mixing familiar behavior and new behavior, and asking them to imitate the model killer whale. So, if you look up, this is a new behavior, that's a barrel roll. So the trainer is asking the killer whale to perform a barrel roll, and the other trainer is giving the copy SD. And at this point, one of the 3 killer whales was able to reproduce 2 new behaviors at the first time. The first trial, the first time he saw the behavior, he was able to reproduce exactly the same behavior. So this leads to a paper published in 2012. So we did trials between 2009 to 2011 with the familiar behavior and with the new behavior, and the paper was published in 2012 showing they can understand the copy SD, they can reproduce something they see, either they know it or they don't know it, but also we knew with this that they can learn the copy SD faster than dolphins, belugas, or apes. So the next step was to test their imitation on vocalization, because we knew they can do it on action very well. So what about the sounds? How can they imitate each other on sounds? But the challenge here was the group of killer whales we had, they had only one vocalization reinforced. They were doing always the same vocalization. But since the beginning of the study, Wiki gave birth to Moana in 2011, so we decided that why not take advantage of the enthusiasm of a very young animal to be able to reinforce many different vocalizations. So this is what we did with Moana. We decided to reinforce different vocalizations. By 2014, it was already able to perform 3 different vocalizations on SD. And by 2015, it was able to produce 6 different vocalizations on SD. So this one is called the Terminator. We have to be very creative about names because we have a lot. This is the wolf. Everything doesn't sound like a wolf now. And that's the favorite one, the fart. So we recorded the sound of Moana to be used in the vocal imitation study we wanted to do. For this study, we choose to work only with Wiki, so the famous one now, because at this time she was the easiest one, she was the fastest one to understand what we wanted, and we were working in a limited amount of time, so she was the only one participating in this session. So we did again kind of two types of setup for the sessions. The first type is we play the sound of Moana via the loudspeaker here, so we let her hear the sound, and then we ask her to reproduce the sound she just heard. And once this was working good, we tried this time to replace the loudspeaker with the voice of a trainer. So the trainer could either try to reproduce a vocalization, an easy one, and ask Wiki to copy it, but then we try to give Wiki human words and ask Wiki to copy the human words. And this leads to what you all heard about, the research that was published in the Royal Society magazine in 2018, showing that she can actually reproduce sounds she never heard before, she never tried to reproduce before. Let's see if we can have an example of that.
Hello? Hello? Amy? Amy? Up, up. Up, up. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Bye-bye.
So this was actually the sexy part of the research that we heard about it earlier this week. This was so easy for us because all the media started to talk about Wiki just because she was reproducing human words. So even though Wiki was the only one in the last research, we did not stop training the co-PhD on the other members of the family. And in fact, during the whole research, like the two studies we had, Wiki was pregnant twice. She had Moana, that you saw earlier in 2011. That's this one, who is actually my very favorite one. And she had his little brother, Keio, who was born in 2013. So we decided, like, it's time to train the baby also on the co-PhD. But here, the challenge was they had no history with the squirt game. So how are we going to introduce the co-PhD to them? So let's see first with Moana. Moana had a great background with vocalization, so we decided, okay, why not use his own vocalization to train the co-PhD? So we reproduced the same setup that we use with Wiki, using a loudspeaker to emit his own vocalization. We let him reproduce the vocalization at first, like the way he wanted to do it without any signal, and then we introduced the co-PhD as a signal for him to wake, and then, okay, this is what we want you to copy. So you have the loudspeaker. This was from the loudspeaker, and this was the one on the co-PhD. So once again, from the loudspeaker. And this was one. One more from the loudspeaker. So once this was working great, we decided to go to generalization of copying action. But in fact, this was the hard part with Moana, because as soon as we introduced another animal doing an active behavior next to him, every time we present the co-PhD, he was just trying for sounds, because that was the beginning of his training. So This was the very hard part for him to understand. Well, you can try for sounds, but you can also try for action. And he's still under training with that. And so now let's talk about Keio, the little brother of Moana. So we introduced Keio to the co-PhD a bit later in 2017. And once again, because he had no history with the skirt game, no background with vocalization, and because of what we learned from Moana, that if you go only with sounds, it's very hard then to go with action, we decided let's do a very basic training and introduce the co-PhD into it. So we were already working with the visual barrier. You see a trainer presenting, this is a fluke wave SD to Inuk. And here, Keio received the co-PhD and the fluke wave SD. For him to understand, every time we ask something with the co-PhD before, you're reproducing exactly the same thing that the animal next to you. And we can move on with the training once we see that Keio starts anticipating the behavior before he received the familiar behavior, so right after the co-PhD. This is what's happening here. We said, okay, we think he's ready and we can just give the co-PhD and try if he's capable of reproducing the same thing than Inuk. So look at the last trial. This time it's going to be only the co-PhD here. There you go. So this co-PhD, besides of being for research, was actually a very great tool in training. So at first it was we only used it with research. We didn't put it into training or anything. But the last 2 years, we decided like why not use it in training? And we had a lot of variability doing this. It was just another tool. But also something very important for us, it was we were actually able to train new vocalization, because usually what happens when you want a new vocalization, you have to wait for your animal to present the vocalization. Then you can reinforce it, you can capture it, put in an SE, and you have a new vocalization. But here, if one of the animals started to present the vocalization, we did the same thing, reinforcing, capturing the vocalization, putting in an SE. But then, once we had one vocalization on one animal, we could actually use the co-PhD to train the vocalization on the other animal. We could choose, this is the vocalization I want you to learn. And then, of course, when they present the vocalization, we go through the reinforcing, capturing, and putting it on SD. So that was very important for us. And the main part of this co-PhD is that we're still doing research with it. I cannot really talk about it right now because it's research and it's not published yet, but we are still using it in research. That's very important. And involving the babies was also a very good point for us because we want to keep going with our research. We want to keep learning about those animals, so why not have even more animals capable of imitating the other on SD. And the last part, thank you for everyone, and I have a last one for you. So 3 weeks ago, one animal, Wiki, actually started to present again a new vocalization that we were able to reinforce, to capture, and to put on SD. And in less than 1 week, we were able to ask the other animal, copy this vocalization, copy this vocalization. And this is what we have now. This is the very last one. Thank you, everyone.